Hello, and welcome back to Bitwig. Today, let's build an ambient set. Now, there's a few different ways to do this. So, what's the general principle? With ambient, music is kind of being turned on its head. Our ideas of notes and timing and regularity all gets a little bit broken, all gets a little bit deconstructed. So, let's try that in a few different ways. Now, the way I want to start is, number one, let's try an arpeggiated rhythmic element that just doesn't quite fit to the beat grid the way we might normally expect. So, okay. So if we're going to arpeggiate, let's go ahead, add an arpeggiator in here. That's not bad. Now, it would be nice to have a little velocity sensitivity here. FM4 is not doing that by default, so let me bring down the general gain for every note, and then let the velocity control it and push it back up when it's hard. Okay. Now, let's change the pattern a little bit. Okay. Too regular. Yeah. That feels a little bit better. And then maybe just a little bit of pitch transposition in the middle, which is going to land in a slightly different octave each time. Okay. That's not too bad. Now, I want to keep that going. So let's play a little trick. Where was I? Yep. I was up on this G. Now I'm going to make a note that's a little bit longer than its clip and starts a little bit earlier. So in theory, we're not going to hear this so much with the arpeggiator, but in theory, this is just going to never let go, really, because when it gets to the end, it's going to automatically say, oh, there's still a note here. It's still playing. That's not bad. Maybe one thing that we could add. It's time already for some effects, and ambient, as a friend would say, means reverb. So if this is here, okay. That kind of paints in a nice way. So reverb itself has a little flanger in there. And a little automatic sparkle. Okay, so number two, I don't think we need this audio track. Let's just try a texture element, something that's not so much musical. I've got some of my audio files pulled up here, so I'm going to drag one in. And we notice if I land where the launcher would be, it says, oh, that's an audio clip. You want to play it. Right, but what if I want it to be a track? Cool. Now it's a sampler. Yeah, this just seems like a little bit of something we could deconstruct. And part of how sampler helps us do that is by having more than just a regular sample player mode, because I want to slow this down, but I know what's going to happen. I'm not trying to make everything into super boomy bass. Let's explore it in a granular way. Let's switch over to textures mode. We've got some stretch here already. Now you hear it sounds pretty consistent every time I trigger it right now, which is where the motion parameter comes into play, which just charmingly offers the ability to say, well, how about some animation to the playhead? How about a bit of randomization in there? So there's some jump and some movement and some bouncing. That's kind of fun. Let's try to loop this around some constraints. Maybe just grab some audio around it. Yeah, that'll turn it back around. That's not bad. Can do shorter grains. Speed's not bad. Now, maybe this should fade in a bit, fade out a little bit, so when we let go, it'll kind of extend a little bit. I'm gonna double click here, just so we can kind of zoom in and get a better sense of all of it. Now, if we're kind of playing in this granular way, there's two things that become fun. One, yes, is randomization, but first, let's use Bitwig's voice stacking and just turn that on. Because it's an easy way in this case to say, every note I play, I'd rather have 5 notes play, which for the time being, as we talked about before, is just going to be louder, because everything's still moving in lockstep together. Now that motion is still randomized for the voices, but there is a voice stack modulator. I could grab the normal stack spread, which is the plus minus for each voice, but in this case, I want to nudge the playhead, which really only wants to think in a forward direction. So I'm going to take the voice stack modulator, which defaults to say, hey, we're just moving things forward. And now I'm going to nudge the play position forward just a tiny, tiny bit. So if I play already, everything's together. And then if I adjust this a wee little bit, there's my 5 voices. I could totally randomize those, but I don't want them completely dissociated from each other. I'd like something going on there. And while that's going, yes, time for some random. Yes. Time to make it a little bit slower, and perhaps the grain size. Usually when you randomize a couple of things within a granular setting, it's gonna feel rich. So now each voice is kind of moving in its own way. Let's do the same with panning, which means we should set this plus minus. Okay, that's pretty good. So we've got a textural element. We added a convolution. Maybe, no colors is sad. Maybe it's time to add another aux track here. Oh, excuse me, I want to add another effects track. And in this case, let's go for something different. Let's go for something delay plus. I'm going to right arrow into here. Maybe something bouncy. Yeah, That's a little something to begin with. A little bit of wash on the blur side, a lot of feedback, some ducking, maybe a little less ducking for now. Okay, we've got a reverb, we've got a delay. One fun thing we could even do is let the reverb feed the delay a little bit on its own. So let's play our FM bit again. Maybe it could just feed that delay some on its own. It's just kind of growing with a unique little shimmer over time. And as we put more things there, that should round itself out a little bit. Okay, so we've got a couple elements. We've got the one rhythmic that's a little off. We've got the textural thing that we can figure out how to use. Okay, let's take music apart. I have an idea. I tend to play the keyboard. I like to just play things in and see what happens. So again, let's take a sound from scratch. So this is the default phase 4. Maybe we can adjust it a little bit. Let's have it ramp in. A little bit. Pull down a little further. Hey, look at that. It already has velocity sensitivity built in. Maybe a little glide even. Okay, now I want just a little bit of motion in what we've got here. Maybe give it a little bit of bassy bass. Just a little bit for now. With that more later. Okay, now I like having some modulation on the modulation. And don't forget, when you're programming sounds, if you've got a heads-up display, I mean, go with it, because you will really feel the instrument when you can see it first. Now, instead of adding another envelope, because I kind of want an AD to push this up instead of just keeping it open and steady the whole time, I've already got a filter envelope generator, which I'm not using. The filter envelope amount is down to 0, so let's go ahead and take it. Yes, velocity sensitive, please. Now it'll travel further if it's hit harder. And maybe it's a little far. Maybe let's bring it down just. Okay, I just like that little waveform breaking, especially once we end up taking our level and sending it over on the track. So I like hitting record. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to hit record. And I'm just gonna play. Let's see what happens. Okay. We got some chord blocks. We're not going to listen to this other bit in the background. So now, here's what I want to do. I'm going to go ahead and look at what we had. Looks like a little fake note there. And let's take these apart into some individual pieces. I'm just going to drag notes that make sense and drop them in and get a new clip. I'm just going to drag notes that look associated and make sense and get a new clip. Because what I want to do is deserialize. We're used to notes happening in order in regular music, whether it's written down on a piece of sheet music on paper or it's in an arrangement. We're just used to taking it and having it work in one particular direction. So that's what I want to try breaking now. Thank you, arranger. We are done with you. So I'm going to treat this very first clip a little bit differently. This is going to kind of be my starting point, but now I have all these clips, and this is a good reason to use next actions. What I want to do for each of these is, in most cases, to say after you play something random. That could mean that exactly the same clip plays again of these 5 clips. It could mean that something else gets triggered, anything else on this track. And I'm going to go ahead and take the very first one and say, okay, now after you trigger, you're kind of my lead. You're the one that's going to start. And after that, I want to play an other within this clip block. Now, what is this idea of block? It's a way of sneaking arrangement into the launcher itself. So things are freely happening, and they're happening in different orders. But now I can kind of construct things by saying all of these clips are touching each other. This is a block. If I had more clips over here, now this is a different clip block. So when this says random other, it's only going to pick one of these 4 clips, but not jump over here. And maybe when this semi-dramatic ending happens, I always want it to pick something random in the next block. So I've made a clip block here. I took my notes, I pulled them apart. This is the performance I had, but now it's going to play in a different order potentially, and maybe even skip things altogether. Now, what do I have over here? I have rests. That's kind of cool. Maybe I want rests of slightly different lengths, and that's what's going to randomly be chosen from. And none of these I want to loop. Oh, none of these. Because on the next action, I want them to return to the first in the previous block. So if I trigger one of these clips, anytime it happens, right after it plays its rest, it's going to jump back to my lead clip here. get a little bit more minor in there sometimes. I do like random pauses of different lengths. And we can kind of shorten these gaps at the end of the clips. Spread that out a little more. Now, we've taken some music and put it out of order and broken it up, and it wasn't that hard to play around with. Now here's one idea. We haven't touched what we want to do with our noise element yet. So let's get a little tricky. What if, instead of rests, what we did was trade off and say, okay, when something happens here, now what we're going to do is actually send notes to the other track. So my arrangement logic on this one track that's deciding things will know, oh, it's only this track happening or the other one at a certain moment. So for these clips, I would like to insert some notes on channel 2. And by the way, this other track, we do have these monitoring modes. I'm going to say this one is always listening. It doesn't matter whether it's record enabled or not. And what it's listening to is the phase 4 track with that little note transpose I put in there. So even if I don't use it for anything, now it's an anchor point that I can pull notes out of. But right now, it's happening on every note, which has its charms. But instead, what I'm going to say is, okay, only if it was playing on channel 2. So these notes are all on channel 1 by default. And now over here, I'm going to insert some notes that are on channel 2. And then the one thing that's missing is I don't want my phase 4. Let's filter out channel 2. So now we should only hear one or the other happening at a time. Okay. This is kind of fun. I've got notes happening out of order, something that is musical, but it's been broken apart. I've got lines trading, textures, and other things. Now, let's finish off this idea that when this other track is happening, we could change the sound a little bit further. Now, remember from when we talked about mixing, we looked at the fact that Bitwig does indeed have track level and project level modulators and controls. So what I could do on my kind of relentless arpeggiator track over here is say, maybe this one wants to be driven by an audio signal. Let's set up an audio sidechain that is listening to the output of that, no, not the arpeggiated track, to the noisy plunky track. So now when it starts happening, I'm going to get a signal. I'm going to make it a little bit slow. Well, RMS will make it even slower. And I want to push it a little bit. Let's just make this random altogether, because then it might trigger over here more often. And now when this triggers, what I want to do is say the noisy element has come. Let's turn down the normal volume, and maybe we make the convolution pre and have it go up. So we're going to get reverb instead of normal. And then back to normal. As all things random, they go from never triggering the thing you want to only triggering the thing that you wanted a minute ago. Okay, that's cool. Maybe what we could do now is try one other idea. I've got two different auxes. Colors are cool. Let's go with some colors. I want to add one more aux. Over here, we kind of deserialized notes, as I'm saying. Instead of having them in a fixed order, we took that apart. Maybe it's time to add one more effects track. And for this effects track, I want something that's kind of like a test tone. Something that, let's get rid of notes altogether. Let's have something that, a droning element, like literally droning. It doesn't care about keys being played. So if I want a test tone, then of course, what I think I'll reach for is Polymer. This is an instrument. Instruments are normally triggered by notes. That's true, but this is based on grid stuff. Haha. So I am going to set Polymer to be true mono. I'm going to go down to one voice. Now we're at the digimono, which is still polyphony, but no, I want true mono, because this means it is always on all the time. I have one voice playing already. And a nice little side effect of having segments, the MSeg curve type device, is see how it's at the end point? Well, I can decide whatever the end point should be. So, this is my new test tone. Hi, hello. So let's go ahead. I don't really need these things, I think. We can get rid of them. So I like union. Union's nice. Maybe just a tiny bit of stereo beating, because this is going to be going for a while. Let's try, I think the Salin key might be nice here because it has these extended slope options that can go a little bit stronger. Maybe we can even push it a little bit more. Now, even though my tracks are defaulting at -10, my auxes are defaulting at 0 because they normally, well, act more like auxes. But I've got these two here. This feels pretty good. Now, maybe a little bit of modulation. Speaking of all these curve devices, how about the curves himself? Now, I like this little breach wave. That's fast. Since it doesn't mean anything anymore, I'm going to set it to a bar and maybe have a calmed down version so you can see the levels it's happening at. It's not going to the full extent. And then just have it, because it's going to keep going. Just have a little bit of motion. Cutoff isn't bad. Maybe pulse width modulation isn't bad. Oh. And this is Polymer. If I want it to be cooler than test tone, maybe using some built-in phase mod from the sub is a good way to go, and then I could modulate that a little bit too. A little bit goes a long way. So now I've got a droning element. Notes are never being triggered. I mean, I could turn off all these keyboard tracking controls, but nothing is coming in. Now, why did I put this on an aux? It could have gone anywhere. But the cool thing about auxes is that they allow audio routing from any channel to come into them. So if I want audio to come in and do something, let's go ahead, take the audio rate modulator. So it's not averaging the signal. It's going to be a nice fast signal. Gonna have to boost it pretty good. So now the arpeggiator is a source material, but it's the audio of the arpeggiator. And what do we want it to do? Well, maybe the same controls are good ones. There's that passive moment. Now, while we're at it, we're going to hear this, so it can stay in the background. We had done a little bit of amplitude correction by monitoring the audio from our noisy track that comes occasionally. Maybe the same thing could happen over here. So on Polymer. By the way, notice that modulator icon with the open circle, because there are currently no modulators at this level. Now the circle is filled. Yes, there are subtle ways to see where these things are taking place. So maybe over here in this case, I actually want it to push its level up a little bit. So it becomes a little bit more predominant whenever the noisy aspect is coming through. Yeah, now it's happening all the time. Let's switch it back. Yes, random in, other in block. Just stay here after the lead clip plays. Now, while it's droning, because it will never stop, let's go ahead and make one last control. I think a macro might be nice to kind of push the sound in a different direction, because we have all these octave controls over here. And again, when I'm tuning macros, it's nice to put them in an extreme position, so just by assigning their range, you can hear it. I want this on the right side to go more bassy. So that'll get there pretty quickly because I have a pretty strong value. So it'll get there fast. And then maybe a little slower. I also want this one to go down because it's nice to have these ranges that kind of happen at different times. So then you've got a little more diversity. And maybe when this is moving, it could also move the... Maybe it could move the phase modulation amount while it goes. Because as one last thing, as we finish up, I just want to think on the project level for a moment. So I'm going to go ahead and yes, we do have project modulators. The last thought I've got about ambient, yes, the last thought I've got about ambient is instead of, we've already taken notes apart, we've already taken rhythms apart, we've kind of removed the idea of notes at a certain point. Well, now maybe we can elevate automation to take the narrative. And by automation, sometimes modulation might be the best form of automation. I do have this segments. It is something freely shapeable. And let's go ahead and make it bipolar so I can get it to move up and down. And then maybe it can move back. That's not a terrible curve. Now what's useful, see this range 0 to 1. It means whatever rate we're happening at. So in this case, we're going over the course of a bar that we're going to go from up to down and back. Now that might sound long and that might sound fine, but I'm in ambient time. I could go with milliseconds or seconds or minutes. So how about now I'm looking at a chart of exactly 1 minute's time over which modulation will occur. Now, what do I want to happen? Well, I just made this nice little bass knob. This is what I'm thinking about. Maybe I want to rebalance things a little bit. So this global level modulator will push up towards the bass frequencies and maybe stay there a little bit more, at least for this sound. And if this one's going to push up, then maybe some of the other sounds can push in a different direction. Maybe the arpeggiated sound can open one of its higher frequencies. So while it goes bassy, this one goes a bit brighter, and maybe why not detune a little bit just so you have some motion and some change. It's always the slow changes that make everything interesting. And then also in this phase 4, we did have this bassy oscillator over here. So maybe let's get that moving as well. So if I'm pushing it down, that means when it goes up, it goes down, and when it goes down, it's going to swing back the other way. Now, I've got a project level modulator. That's super cool. How do I trigger it? How do I launch an envelope? Envelopes require notes. Well, the good news is I can make a track with, I don't know, nothing on it. And go ahead and make a clip. What color did I not use? That looks fair. Yep. And it has a note. And you know what? That'll be enough. The only thing I'm going to do is say make this trigger immediately. So now I've got a little clip here. When I click play, whole transport will start. It's going to fire off a note. Right now the note is not going anywhere because on the project level I can now say what is the note source that you want to trigger these project-based modulations. Well, I think inst4 that's my track. Let's be a little bit more useful. This is my dummy track. He's not really playing notes. He's just triggering stuff. One shot mode. Don't loop. Don't loop. Hear it? Just make a couple more controls. Because a different narrative would be the auxes feeding back into each other. Thank you for joining us. See you again next time.